Hello there, my name is Kirin Sage, and welcome to the first proper video in the avatar texturing tutorial series. As I mentioned in the intro for the series, this video is going to be on model UV unwrapping, which is essentially the setup you need to do before you start texturing. It's going to be how any 3D program knows where to put the colors on your model when you do the textures. Because without it, as I mentioned in the intro, if you try to put any color on the model, it will just slap that one color on the entire thing. You're not really going to be able to do what you want to do with it, so you need to do the UV unwrapping just as a setup. All right, without further ado, we're going to start off with just the cube, just so I can explain the concepts, what UV unwrapping does, how it works, all that good stuff, because the reason we're starting with the cube is just it's one of the easiest things to start out with. Same for like a cylinder, just any like basic primitive shape. So, easy way to think of UV unwrapping is flattening out, unfolding the model, sort of like unfolding a cube. So what you want to do, you want to go into your 3D modeling program. In my case, I use Blender to do all my modeling, UV unwrapping. That's how I preview my textures, it's how I do my renders, all that good stuff. And what you want to do, go into edge edit mode. I have a shortcut in here that gives me this pie menu, but if you're using just plain vanilla Blender, you would hit tab to go into edit mode. You'd be in vertex by default. You can also hit this little drop down over here, and what you want to do to switch to edit mode, you would normally hit 2. I don't use these shortcuts because, again, I have that add-on. It has its own shortcuts that override things. I could cover it in a different video, but for now, we're just going to be focusing on the simple stuff. I will be referring to stuff with basic Blender keybinds. So as I said, you'd hit tab to go into edit mode, hit 2 to go into edge mode. Then what we're going to want to do is we need to start selecting our edges where we're going to want to break up the model and unfold it. These are called seams. So like for the first part of it, that's the biggest bit. So if you've ever like made a papercraft cube or anything like that, you'll know simple process of like how to unfold it, but I'm still gonna walk you through step by step. So we would select these edges right here for like the big longer part of the cube, and we would hit U to bring up the UV mapping context menu, and then we would hit mark seam, and we would repeat that process for all the other parts where the model will be broken up. You may notice I'm not selecting any of the edges down here. That's because it's still going to be connected at this bottom face right here. Then once you've got all your seams assigned, you would hit A to select everything, hit U again to bring up the UV mapping context menu, and then you would need to hit unwrap. What that does is it tells Blender, hey, our seams are set up, do your thing, unfold the model, lay it out. And then if we go into the UV editing workspace, you'll see we have it selected here. Not selected. Then if we go into the UV editing workspace, you'll see we have it all unfolded and flattened here. As I said, looks sort of like a papercraft cube. And as a more complex example, we're going to bring up this one. This model I'm bringing up is the Halonix. It's by Arctic Spear. The link for that will be down in the description. Hang on, I need to do some tweaking. All right, as I said, this is the Halonix. It is by Arctic Spear. The link for that will be down in the description. It will be the model we're using for the entire tutorial series. So when we're doing the Blender texturing, when we're doing the Fire Alpaca texturing, when we're doing the Substance Painter texturing, all the texturing we do, all the avatar setup in that bonus video I mentioned in the last one, it's all going to be done using this model. Again, I did not make this model. It is done by Halonix. Not Halonix. It is the Halonix by Arctic Spear. Once again, the Gumroad link will be down in the description if you want to check that out, if you want to mess with it yourself. But without further ado, if we go in, what we're going to do first is we're going to hide the horns because we're not going to be messing with the horns. We're just going to be focusing on the main body. So what we do, as I said, tab into edit mode. You may notice there aren't actually any seams. These blue lines here, they are just sharp edges, so it tells Blender smoothing. While yes, you are trying to smooth it shade, these things are flat, sharp, or like harsh, sharp edges. So when, as you'll notice, if we go back in object mode, you can see like definite lines there where those sharp edges were assigned. And like if I were to go into edge mode and not there, edge mode and hit mark sharp and then go back in object, you can't really see it there because it's sort of a flat thing. But if I were to reselect the edge and move it a bit, you notice it does have a sharp edge. It's not smooth, it's just sharp, it's harsh, because we've told Blender, hey, it's sharp. But that's something for a different video. As I was saying, now you're not going to see any seams on this because the seams have been baked into the model already by its creator, and that will be a common occurrence with most models, because what these creators do, they make the model and they UV unwrap it and everything to make it ready for you, the buyer, the consumer, to be able to just work with it. You don't need to do any additional setup or anything. You can just grab it and go. But for the purpose of this video, we're going to re-UV it. We're not going to use the new UVs I'm making in this video just for simplicity's sake. I'm just using this as a demonstration to show you if you had to UV an avatar model, this is how you would do it. So, an easy way to think about it that I've found is when you're doing your UVing, think about it as the seams on clothing. You're going to want to think, okay, if I'm looking at like my shirt or something, where is it stitched together? Where do I see seams? And you'll realize there's some logic to it, and you can sort of translate those seams onto an actual body. So for the first part here, we're going to UV the torso. And what we will do is we're going to start with the groin area right here. We're going to follow that loop all the way around. Try not to zoom into the model as we're doing it. So we're going to follow that loop all the way around. First, one thing I am going to do, though, is I am going to hide the tail and all this fluff up here just so we can see what we're doing. And now that we've hit it, you can see it's not really all that easy to follow the way it's been laid out. So we're going to change how we do it a little. So we are still going to start with the groin, however, but instead of going up this way, which would go around the butt, we are going to just start it with the thighs, which doing it with the thighs, it's easier because you can hold Alt click and that will select the entire edge loop. We're going to do the same thing, the Alt Shift click this time, select the loop on the opposite side, and then we're going to move up a bit to the arms. And we're just going to keep Alt Shift clicking to select chains of edges, the edge loops. Do the same thing on the opposite side. And what we're going to, and then one loop for the neck. I forgot to hold Shift there. A bit of an explanation as the keybinds I'm holding. So Alt lets you select a loop of everything. So like if I were in face mode and Alt clicked right here, it would select the faces along this ring right here. As you can see when I'm doing it with the edges, it will select all the continuous edges. And Shift lets you just add on to the selection. Otherwise, if I was just doing Alt click without Shift, you'd see it gets rid of all the selection I had previously. So what we're going to do now that we have the torso sectioned off, we're going to hit U, we're going to hit Mark Seam. What that does is that's set up seams that will separate the torso from everything else. We still need to do some extra bits just to get it properly flattened out and everything. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select from this edge here and just hit Control click to select along a path. We're going to do that all the way up to where we have our other seam. And then once again, we're going to do that on the other side. Again, control click like shift click will still keep your previous selection while you select new geometry. And then we're going to hit U and then mark seam. And then we're going to do the same one from the neck seam to the arm seam. Again, same on the other side. Just need to think where the edge is. So from there to there. You mark seam. That's the torso. UV'd. So you notice now if we select everything, hit U, and then we unwrap, and then we go to the UV editing. You notice we still have the torso here. That's all connected and separated. Everything else is sort of laid out because it's got its seams baked in. We haven't overwritten anything there. Plus, they are their own separate meshes while they are still part of the same object. You will notice you can't find where the arms are. That's because they have no proper seams on them. They're going to be just flattened or squashed somewhere, which is why you need to make sure everything is UV'd, everything is done in a sort of logical way so that it can break the model up, flatten it out, and it will be good to work with. Like, I'm fairly sure this right here, because you can see it's a bunch of really dense geometry. You can sort of tell by the shapes where things are. So this right here is the head. But if we were to continue, so we'll go back into layout mode just because we're just using layout mode for doing the UVing instead of actual UV editing because it's simply how I prefer to do it. You can sit in the UV editing workspace, just UV everything. You can set up what most people do, they'll have what's called a UV grid texture attached. So instead of having this pink color on it, it will have a grid so you can tell the sizing of your UVs and whether or not they're evenly placed, whether or not they're going to mesh together well. I don't do that, mainly because most of the time I don't actually UV things. I typically work with models that have already been UV'd because most of the time I'm not making custom models for people. I'm just texturing models that people have bought. They want textured, and so they just come to me and say, hey, could you texture this for me? Not quite exactly like that, but you get the gist. So what we're going to do now, we're going to go for UVing the arms. You will notice the fluff we can't hide it because it's still part of the same mesh. So what we're going to do that you will find is a common practice with furry models, at least, is we're going to select the edges around where the fluff meets the rest of the arm. And as you're shift clicking, you may have seen there, if you accidentally select the wrong edge, you can just shift click that edge again. It will get rid of it. Hit that one. Gonna hit U, mark seam. Go over here. Start selecting the edges again. You will notice as you turn the camera around, you will have that issue I'm having of randomly having your camera clip into the thing. As I said, just take it slow. Just select those edges. I want to select all the way around. I'm fairly sure I did it a bit different on one side than the other. No, that seems to be right. Although, I think I did miss a few edges. So we're just going to go through. We're going to reselect those. Get them selected. And hit U, mark seam. There we go. Now we can tell they've been UV'd because they have this orange line on them. That just tells you, hey, that's just Blender's way of saying, like, hey, you said this is a seam, so we're going to remember this as a seam. When you unwrap it, we'll break it up along here. So now that we've gotten the fluff UV'd, we're going to go through, select the edges along here. Notice we don't need to reselect the edges we've already marked as seams because obviously Blender's already been told they're a seam, so we don't need to go through and remind it like, hey, don't forget this is a seam. Yeah, I'm going to Shift-Alt-Click around here just to select the wrist a bit easier. It's that one. Then go to the other side, do the same thing. Now, if you've used Blender before, you may notice that I am doing this the long way. I'm not using the symmetrize function. That is because I find if you're learning to do something new, like for all I know, if you're watching this, you might have never done UV unwrapping. I find repeating the action does help you learn it a bit better. So it helps to just not symmetrize things too much. Just go through, repeat it. It helps build the muscle memory. It helps ingrain it in your memory. Now that we got both those selected, we're going to go in, we're going to mark seam. And if we select everything again, hit U and then unwrap, and then go back into UV editing, you notice now we've got these sheets where the arms are. And with that, I think I've covered it enough to give you the general idea of how you would UV unwrap a model. Essentially, that same process for the entirety of the model. If we kept going, we'd be repeating it for the legs and the fingers and the toes and the head and the ears, just everything on the model. You want it all seamed and being able to be flattened in a way that makes sense so that you can actually work with the model. Like if I were to reload the file, plantigrade, open. If I were to reload the file right here, just like the body, go into UV editing, select everything, you'll notice everything's laid out evenly. You will notice there is overlap. That's because the model itself, it uses multiple materials. So now you can have that bit of overlap there because when you just select it based off of the material, which most dedicated texture painting programs are going to do, you won't see all those extra overlapping seams or UVs, whatever you want to call them. You can call them seams, you can call them UVs, you could call them fucking islands, whatever you want to call them, whatever helps it make sense for you, just call it that. But as you can see, if I deselect everything and say, let's go to the body and just select that, there's nothing overlapping here. Same thing if we were to deselect that, go over to eyes and then select that. There's nothing overlapping there. That's because they are different materials. So they can still look at the same texture coordinates for the textures assigned to them. And that overlap isn't going to be an issue because they're on different materials telling them what to look like with their own textures, their own UV coordinates. So with that little intro, the brief explanation of UVing your model, telling it how to look, I do hope that makes some sense for you. If I missed anything or if you have any questions, feel free to leave a comment. I would be happy to answer to the best of my ability. Or if I can't answer, I would be happy to try to direct you to where you could get a proper answer about that. So I do plan to release more of this series every week. If I miss or I'm late, it's just because I've got a lot of stuff going on. But I will be trying my best to get out at least one video in this series a week. With this UVing out of the way, the next video is going to be start of the chapter for covering doing the texturing in Blender. So the program we've been using here to do the unwrapping, it's also going to be what we're using to do the texture painting. And again, next video and all the videos further on in the tutorial, they will be done using the Halonix. Once more, for the last time, the link to the Halonix will be down in the description. And with all that said, I do hope you enjoyed the video. I do hope you learned something from this. I do hope I was able to explain stuff properly. Once again, if you have any questions, feel free to comment down below. I'll be happy to answer or help out to the best of my ability. And I hope you have a good day, night, morning, afternoon, evening, whatever unknown time of day it is for you. I hope you have a good one of it. And I'll see you all around. Have a good one. Bye-bye.